And we're back with a special visitor on the side here. This is our life now, pretty much all the time. Anyway, so this is the last part of the leadership lectures, so I'll be happy to get this one out for you guys. And I will share my screen. I only started like this so you could see my little baby here. But yeah, we're going to go into this last spot, which is leadership context is what I call it. So I'm going to talk about leadership in context of the workplace and things that have been moving forward in our research and how things are going the way we approach it. So one thing to keep in mind, which I've been talking about, especially since I've been doing recorded lectures, is that the typical quote unquote workplace is no longer a clear concept. It's not one way work works, if you will, anymore. So a lot more emphasis on groups and teams in the modern workplace than there might have been in the past, which increases the importance of participative leadership styles and also the leader emergence within those groups. Telecommuting, again, this is huge right now, and it is difficult to establish transformational leadership and high quality LMX relationships when work is virtual like this is. There's, we have to seek ways to increase and enhance communication in different ways than we used to when we're in a more traditional working environment. And there is a little bit of research on virtual teams and virtual work and how leadership, trust, all of these things are different in these types of teams and in these types of organizations. But there's not a lot out there right now. But I can imagine that after all of this is finally over, we're going to see a big increase in research on this topic because of the impact that it's had on the way we work. And also, I believe that we're going to see an increase in telecommuting in general. I think a lot of jobs are learning that they are able to be done in this way when they previously thought that they couldn't, or maybe they were moving in that direction but never really took the step. But this kind of sped up the process of virtualizing work in a lot of companies. These are just, my theories and ideas, but I definitely can imagine that that's what's going to come out of, that's one of the things that's going to come out in our research. So also temporary workers is a big factor in kind of the changing nature of work. This includes contracted employees, gig workers, and the gig economy. So this is interesting for leadership because when we talked about that LMX theory, leader member exchange, we know that going from a low quality to a high quality LMX relationship takes a long time. But if the workers are gig or contractor or they're not really full-time employees, it might have it might result in those high quality relationships never emerging because maybe leaders don't want to invest in these resources or invest in these temporary workers because it's a lot. And maybe they just aren't around long enough for it to happen even if the leaders want to invest. Going back to this topic also of demographic differences in leadership, it's really important to bring this up multiple times that there's, we're missing research on race and ethnicity differences, but there's a lot of research on gender, and the research is a little bit sad sometimes with what the findings are. Even though women comprise about half of the workforce, and in fact have more bachelor's degrees than men, women are largely underrepresented in leadership positions across the board. My other dog is here on the ground being really obnoxious because she wants to get out of the room. Bailey, come here. Oh, all right. So now we get to look at both of their faces. So yes, so here's some of the areas where women are underrepresented: CEOs, military officers, government, etc., etc. And I included these characters just as an aside because I have to geek out. Is I always felt that this movie about Ant-Man and the Wasp was a little upsetting because in the original comic book Avengers, the character who came up with the name of Avengers is actually Janet Van Dyne, or yeah, Janet, the original Wasp, and in the movie, Hope is her daughter. But they made it about this guy, even though he's not even an original Avenger, and the Wasp was. But at least in the movies, they made, the name came from Carol Danvers, so that was kind of cool. Anyway, women in leadership, yeah. So, why do you guys think that women are less likely to be leaders? I already talked about that a little bit as to why, some of the theories as to why. Um, but do you think women are less qualified than men? I know you're all going to answer correctly, which is no, they are not less qualified. And then we see similar trends for race and ethnicity where white leaders are more common. But again, it's due to those implicit leadership theories. And you have a prototype of what a leader is, and you just expect that that's what you're going to see, and so that's what you're more comfortable with. I already talked about this, so I'm not going to go on and on about it, but it is interesting to note that even among women and racial minorities, these stereotypes exist, and like we don't even see ourselves as leaders or potential leaders, and that's the whole you can't be what you can't see. And that gets into social psych as well. But also for a little visual aid, I did want to show you this pyramid that it just goes to show the percentage of women in positions in leadership in top 500 companies, and how the higher up the ladder you go, the fewer women there are. So, a lot of people will have their ideas about why this is, and that gets into the leaky pipeline and other theories, but it's definitely something, we could talk about for ages and ages, and I hope that you will post in the discussions about it a little bit, but it's just something I want you guys to look at and think about and come up with your ideas about why this is. Come up with your ideas about how to fix it, if it is the problem even that you think needs to be fixed. So we know there are gender differences in leadership styles as well. So we tend to see men doing task-oriented leader behavior more and women doing the relationship-oriented, which, if you remember from all of our theories, both are very important, neither one more important than the other. There's also this idea that men tend to be more assertive or agentic and women tend to be more, quote, tender-minded. I don't really like that terminology, but communal, relational. And men tend to exemplify higher competitiveness than women, which can be both good and bad. I really encourage you guys to think of things not as black and white, like this is good and this is bad for most situations, but that there's a time and a place for it, Women are more high on agreeableness than men and tend to be more extroverted than men as well. So while women exhibit a lot of behaviors that are critical to leadership, so do men, but women exhibit more extroversion, which is, again, the highest predictor of leadership, if you remember from the beginning of this lecture. So probably the reason, based on all the science we have, that there's a female underrepresentation in leadership is probably more due to bias and prejudices, and even self-bias of the women in the organization, and then bias coming from outside, the leaky pipeline, lack of opportunity, all these things, some of which we've talked about. There's really no evidence that women or racial minorities or any group that's underrepresented lack some type of skill or ability to do leadership. It's just more likely that there's bias and there's issues. And we see a similar trend for LGBT workers as well. And if you do like to go in and read some articles, there's a few right there that you can, if you want to, go into Google Scholar or something and read. If you're interested in this topic, I know I don't want to spend too much time on it because this was one of my major areas of research when I was doing my master's degree. So I could talk about it for ages, but I'm going to go ahead and move forward from here. So some cross-cultural considerations. I've been trying to incorporate at least a little bit of talk of cultural differences in most of our lectures. One major study called the Globe Study was interested in leadership across countries, and basically what they were looking at is leadership different in different countries? Do people of different cultures say certain behaviors are leadership behaviors compared to others? So basically, and to put it simply, is there some type of universal leader, or is leadership dependent on culture? And is some behavior accepted and rejected differently in different cultures? So, here are the questions. You can read them if you want, but that's basically what they are all saying. Just cultural differences in leadership and attitudes toward leadership behaviors. And I actually found, and here's just kind of the simplified study findings. You can look into it more if you're interested, but there are universally accepted leadership behaviors, including integrity, which I think gets at our Steve Rogers, charisma, which could be our Tony Stark, team orientation, which is also kind of our Steve Rogers, and excellence orientation, which is kind of our Tony Stark, though you could say all of them, or both of them, or all of them. So we found these 4 specific traits are the most universally accepted. And I encourage you to even compare these to some of our leadership theories and think about that. There's also some universally rejected traits of leaders. So being a loner, not cooperative, ruthless, irritable. These are things that almost every culture thinks is a bad leader. And then over here, culturally specific, some cultures find these traits to be good leaders and others find these traits to be of bad leaders. So, take a look at that. Get out the other theories, compare them, see where you stand. And I encourage you guys to think of things that you think maybe make a good leader that other people don't, or I encourage you to think of things that you think make a bad leader, but you find often is rewarded in leadership. So to sum everything up from the whole lecture, let's create a list of things that would make you an effective leader. First, help followers arrive to solutions of their own. Be a guide and a source of wisdom and help, but you're really doing it to let them reach their own conclusions. Second, increase their self-efficacy and promote collective efficacy. Remember, self-efficacy is this trait of believing that you have the ability to do something, I can. And promoting collective efficacy means that we have that as a group together. Also facilitate the learning and development for individuals and groups of individuals. Remember that intellectual stimulation portion of transformational leadership. You want your followers to learn and grow and think for themselves. Express interest and compassion and care. They're not just there to follow you, they're people, and you will want to let them know that you think of them as such. And on a similar note, foster trust and respect and cooperation. And then finally, promote social justice, ethical, and moral behavior. So who do we know who meets all of these criteria? Captain America. At least that's my opinion. He's my favorite Avenger, and that is the hill that I will die on. Okay, and on that note, which is totally relevant, that is everything I have for our lecture on leadership. So go ahead and go to the portal, do the quiz on this whenever you feel ready, and I'll see you in the next lecture, and I hope you guys are staying safe and doing well. That's it. Bye.